Right then, buddy, I really need an EMF reading and then we can leave and you can have fun by... There we go, problem solved, let's go.
I don't play multiplayer games. Well, okay, I don't play most multiplayer games. I've been known to dabble from time to time, but it's almost universally in games where I have control over who can join it, or I at least know and trust those who do. This isn't because I hate people, although the argument could definitely be made, I won't deny that. It's just that I find no sense of enjoyment in being thrown into a pool of 100 people, uncontrollably shrieking, and all of that fun stuff associated with the stereotypical mass multiplayer games. I'm also not fond of being the only chosen one who's 14th in line of all the other chosen ones to turn in the quest that only I could possibly do, so you might be surprised to learn that I'm not really a fan of MMOs either. The last MMO I played was Launch Day Elder Scrolls Online. Should give you some idea of how that went. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is just to preface that when I went into Phasmophobia, the latest early access surprise hit, I had absolutely zero expectations beyond the few RT game videos I'd seen. I knew very little about how much content was there, what exactly it entailed. I genuinely didn't even know it was early access until I actually went to buy it, and whilst it definitely shows that the game needs a little more work, its early access label is actually its greatest asset. We'll get into that in a minute though. For now, for those who may not know much about this little gem, let's talk about what Phasmophobia actually is. Conceived by one-man British developer Kinetic Games, Phasmophobia first emerged in March of this year when its Steam page went live, and it was released into early access with an £11 price tag in September. Although a modest success when released, it truly picked up the pace when it was played by community giants like Pewds, Markiplier and Jacksepticeye, amongst others. As a result, the game exploded in popularity, with its sales figures temporarily exceeding similarly recent breakout success Fall Guys, and the pre-order numbers for Cyberpunk. With its relatively low price tag comparative to its strong replayability, the game was almost guaranteed to strike it big. It just needed that little nudge from the community to get it going. The premise is simple. You are a ghost hunter and it's your job to visit various locations around the USA to capture evidence of the paranormal.
Evidence?
And work out what kind of ghost is haunting the property. You'll be given 4 objectives, one of which is always to identify the type of ghost, and the rest will vary depending on the property, the ghost type, and so on. However, not all objectives can be completed right from the off, as some rely on you having specific types of equipment to complete. You start off only with basic items such as a single video camera with night vision, a regular camera with limited photo spaces, torches and a UV light to help identify interactions left by certain ghosts, usually fingerprints. You're also given a spirit box, which is a somewhat suspect method of capturing ghost voices by scanning radio frequencies and asking a question, with the ghost then using those frequencies to provide basic answers. For example, how old are you? Old. Where are you? Here. That sort of thing. And hey, the important thing is that it works in universe, and that's all that matters.
That's how old
Okay.
years you might, or if he's wrong.
Evidence?
Once you've earned some experience by completing basic objectives, and particularly by correctly identifying the ghost in each area, you'll start earning money and experience. As you can probably imagine, money is used to purchase more extravagant items to taunt your ghostly buddies with. Crucifixes that can end what's called a hunt, which is self-explanatory, but we'll come to that in a few. Salt that can be poured on the ground to show footprints if the ghost walks through it, tripods to more effectively place your video cameras, and a lot more besides. XP is given to help you level up, which for now only affects the kind of items you can buy, with some being gated behind leveling, and the kinds of areas that you can visit. The higher your level, the more extravagant and complex the map and the difficulty, moving from amateur to intermediate to professional as you hone your skills. I wouldn't say that it feels as though there's any increase in the difficulty of the ghosts themselves based on your level, considering I actually died on the very first game I played, so having the ghosts be actually dangerous right from the off allows you to build up ways and means of defending yourself and identifying the ghosts without being mollycoddled. It also means the difficulty can be somewhat adaptive as you start to learn the maps, work with your teammates to coordinate your plans, equipment, or just run around like headless chickens until you all die horribly, whatever floats your boat. It's also worth noting that just having an item react to localized ghost phenomena doesn't automatically mean that this is evidence per se. Your journal acts as a compendium of things found during each mission, storing photographs you've taken that will be auto-labelled if they feature something that will get you extra cash or experience, as well as providing details on each of the ghost types to help you work out what you might be dealing with if you're really struggling for evidence. Crucially though, this page right here is your best friend. You'll want to update this as soon as you get one of the specific pieces of evidence that you need to pinpoint the exact type of encounter you're dealing with, and this is why it's important to pay attention to your readings. An EMF level of 2, for example, is certainly indicative of something, but you'll quickly note that only an EMF level of 5 is worth recording in your journal. Similarly, if it's cold enough to see your breath, that doesn't always guarantee that you're dealing with sub-zero temperatures. Only a thermometer can tell you that for definite. Once you've acquired at least 2 pieces of evidence, the game will let you know what kind of ghosts you're dealing with, so if you are struggling to find that final piece and all your teammates are dead and rudely throwing things at you from beyond the grave, you can at least make a guess that's been narrowed down by what you do have recorded. And once you have 3 pieces of evidence, you'll be given your final answer guaranteed, but if the game doesn't provide it, then that means one of the evidence pieces you've listed is incompatible with another, perhaps where you've misread the thermometer, the EMF, or dismissed a ghost orb as dust. Other challenges present themselves naturally through the gameplay loop. Turning on too many lights in a building will often trip the fuse box, meaning you'll need to go and turn it back on again. It's a good idea to familiarise yourself with the basic map layout shown on the screen in your van when you start, as this will point out roughly where the fuse box is, and if someone stays behind in the van they can guide you over the radio, since you and your pals will be marked on the map as well. Coordination is key, and by extension keeping one eye on the map with the various cameras dotted around a level and your team's sanity is not a necessity, but it can definitely be of use when you're exploring those huge, sprawling maps like the asylum and the school. Speaking of sanity, each member of your team has a sanity meter that can be tracked in the van, and sanity pills are available as a single-use item to bolster it if you're running low. Having low sanity doesn't cause much in the way of negative effects that I've been able to figure out so far, but there is one major factor that it has an impact on, which is the hunts. Sanity is affected primarily by wandering around in the dark, witnessing ghost events, and certain types of ghost will drain your sanity faster when they're in your proximity. And once you start getting low, the ghosts will engage in a hunt, where they will stalk the property for a short period of time, killing the first person who gets in their way. The lower your collective sanity, the more frequent the hunts, and when a ghost is on the prowl, the front doors are locked, leaving you with 2 options: run or hide. Over several hours of playing, I've seen a few variations on hunts, and the game absolutely does a great job at keeping you on your toes. I've seen ghosts that patrol a set pattern, despawning once they reach the end of their route. Some will hurtle about the map like a man possessed, apparently at random, and some will make a beeline straight for whoever has taken their fancy. The relatively large quantity of encounters you'll face aren't guaranteed to act a set way either. Shades, for example, are said to prefer killing when their prey is alone and won't attack if you're in a large group, and this was absolutely true for one of the games that we played. However, this is not 100% guaranteed, as even if you know you're dealing with a shade, your window of safety is still pretty damn small, and they will pick you off if you stray just a little too far from your friends. Some will even mess with you in an attempt to lure you to specific parts of a building or split you up from your teammates, playing around with radios, telephones, car alarms, and other environmental hazards. You and your teammates are also likely to hear and see different things. Death rattles are a common occurrence for those who are far too close to comfort, as well as hearing voices, breaths, and the violent thud of your own heartbeat. And if you hear that during a hunt, you're almost guaranteed to be on death's door. Even so, you're far from helpless. Certain equipment can help in negating a hunt entirely. Some ghost types will disappear immediately if a crucifix is thrown down, and other types can be temporarily dispelled by using smudge sticks, a type of incense, I think, that will cleanse the ghost spawn room when used. These items are limited use, however, so you're encouraged to be preservative and careful when and where you use them, rather than just panic lobbying Jesus around the house. This is the point where we need to discuss the fact that as much as I've praised the game thus far, it's important to remember that this is still an early access title and some features are incredibly buggy. Ghosts can and will kill you in zones that should be safe. Some encounters will say they were one type of ghost whilst acting like a completely different kind, and on one particular occasion we had an entire session break completely where the ghost killed 2 of us, then simply stopped spawning entirely, followed by one of our microphones suddenly failing to pick up sound for no discernible reason, which resulted in our surviving members having to give up and reset the session. And in one of the strangest but simultaneously amusing glitches I've ever seen, my go-to character model of Mr. Average Joe, right here, has the hands of a black woman when he's holding out an item. It's bizarre, but you get used to it. That said, this is an incredibly stable game for an early access release, although this is largely due to the fact that the game isn't exactly a visual feast. Whilst it is built in the Unity engine, part of me thinks that these character models have been borrowed from Source, because good lord, human beings should not be contorting like that. The ghost designs are definitely the best part of the game, and though it's a given that you shouldn't see too much of them as they run the risk of losing their effect if you can just stare at their ugly faces for 5 minutes, it's a shame in the sense that they are the only real standout aspect of the design. The game's maps are reused multiple times with just a slight tweak to the name, and at the moment the number of available maps is fairly limited. There are just 7. Since you have to level up a few times to unlock larger areas, you are going to have to replay a lot of the early game places before you can move on, and I can see this being the biggest point of contention with the game at the minute, especially if you only have one other person or you're playing alone. One thing that does genuinely bother me is the way that you lose your purchased items on death. This applies to anything that you've bought and taken with you to a mission, so if you leave anything new behind rather than adding it to your equipment list, you'll get to keep that. This makes sense in theory, but I feel it would be of great benefit to allow for other players to retrieve fallen friends' equipment and return it to the van so that money isn't constantly wasted on having to replenish the more expensive supplies. We've experimented with this to see how the mechanic actually works, and even tried retrieving tripods, smudge sticks and other items and dropping them into the van, but they were still permanently lost upon returning to the hub room. There is an insurance feature that will give you half the cost of any items you lose upon death back, but you still have to spend a lot of time grinding up cash if you really want to get those high level objectives. It's a real shame, as it's the only real punishment for death. It would be far better served incentivizing survivors to go back into the house or the spooky school to rescue equipment, rather than just giving up and immediately retreating if the odds feel overwhelming. It's also a shame that you can't do more as a ghost. Once you're a spectre, you're essentially in spectator mode, and the only thing you can do is throw objects around. Your microphones are muted, so you can't talk to them. If your friends are paying attention, then this is a great way to either help or hinder them depending on your disposition. Since you're muted the instant you die, the only people you can talk to being any other players who also bit the dust, it would be great to see more opportunities open up, being able to mess with the power or with light switches for example, or having some way to distract the ghost if it starts to bear down on your buddy. The idea of the ghost realm itself is fantastic, but right now it only really encourages you to find ways to circumvent the selective microphone mute, Discord, text, Skype, that kind of thing. However, for the price that it is, and the amount of fun that can be had with a full group of 4 people, so much of the enjoyment you'll glean from Phasmophobia is found not in fantastic graphics or 35,000 maps, but in the interactions with your team, in the desperate escapes from death, in the sudden realisation that the doors are locked and you can't escape. The game's best quality is how easily it allows for and emboldens hilarity through friendship and camaraderie, where death is something to be avoided but not something to really worry about. It encourages those small interactions between friends, stacking up cans in the lobby room lockers, seeing how far away you can get before trying to dunk a basketball with the game's terrible physics engine, creating a human centipede in the van whilst you wait for the player with the worst PC to load in. All of these things serve to highlight the best aspects of playing any online game with your friends, and once you enter that house or that school or whatever it is that you've chosen, the game proceeds to do what it does best: instill an extraordinary sense of paranoia. Way back at the start of the video I mentioned that being early access was this game's best asset, and really I wish that were the case with most, if not all, early access games. The devs have already laid out their plans for what they'll be including in the full release of the game, but what they're after right now is feedback. What do the players want to see? Just more maps, more equipment, more ghosts, playable ghosts, more interactivity? The floor is open right now and will be for the foreseeable future. So if this game looks like your cup of tea, or you're already enjoying it but think it needs something more, then make your voice heard. You never know how even the smallest and daftest of suggestions might become something greater down the line. Like many of the most enjoyable indie gaming experiences, Phasmophobia is a great example of a simple concept executed well, and I look forward to what the future holds for us. Until then, I'll be in a closet with a cross and a can of salt until the 10th of December, and I will see you all very soon.
Holy shit!
Fucking hell!
Oh my god!
Just that relief as soon as we walked out the door. Excuse me, sir. You just turned the light back. The light off.
My wine.
Oh. This guy's throwing shit at me.
Am I bored? Is he?
Yeah, legitimately. Damn it!
Oh yeah, I can see it.
Oh my god!
Oh, did you see him?
I did, but I did not get a picture.